Welcome back for another helping of oysters, clams, and cockles, the #1 rated House of the Dragon podcast in the realm, presented by Bolen Media. I am your host, Ross Bolen, joined as always by Barrett Dudley. And Barrett, before we start, just a quick thank you to everyone in the Clam fam for your patience this week. Remember, the rest of the way we will be recording and releasing our podcast immediately after House of the Dragon airs, just as we did for episode 1. But because we're a bit late this week, Barrett, let's jump right in. Before seeing it, I was actually disappointed that we wouldn't get a new song for our opening title sequence with House of the Dragon. You and I discussed last week, obviously, the potential here.
We didn't know what we were going to get. We heard the musical cues in episode 1, so we knew that they were going to. We knew that the theme, the Game of Thrones theme,
would be utilized.
Dun, 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 was going to be utilized in some capacity, even if it was like rearranged or just kind of like mixed in, kind of
remix.
Right, in those subtle ways, like it was in episode 1. But here it was in all of its glory. It is still the intro song, and I'm basically instant reacting here because I just watched this last night after a 12-hour travel day. That went straight to bed afterwards, basically, and then slept in this morning and got ready to come over here. So this is basically off the dome, and I think for me personally, I'm still processing this a little bit, and I don't really have like a full-on. I don't have a fully formed take on the intro song.
You don't have an approval or a disapproval
the way
yet.
that I do about, say, the Crab Feeder.
Okay, well, let me just tell you straight up, I do have a fully formed take, and this again. When I heard, obviously through social media, that we were going to get the same theme music because I didn't get to watch this.
Okay, so you knew this was
I didn't watch Sunday night. Didn't get to watch Sunday night.
Right.
So I knew I did not know it was coming, but there was rumblings or whatever.
Okay. All right.
And
I stayed my ass off social media.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. But I am extremely pleased with the decision that they made. I mean, that Game of Thrones music just hits different. There's nothing like it. It got me so hyped for the episode. I know that was a very difficult decision, whether they should maintain the theme music throughout all Game of Thrones stories or have an individual song or whatever for each story.
Right.
Love the decision they made. I love the new visuals that go along with it. I'm looking forward to seeing them, with Game of Thrones, every season, even episodically, the visuals would get updated to reflect what we were dealing with.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where not only is it exciting, and obviously they look, man, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. And nobody from Game of Thrones was complaining about the intro or the title sequence. The only thing anybody says bad about Game of Thrones really is about the ending. So again, I'm proud of their ability to sort of push through the negativity, and because there was somebody in the room that was like, shouldn't we just move past Game of Thrones entirely? Shouldn't we just get rid of all the frustration and anger that occurred in seasons 7 and 8?
Yeah.
Why would we bring that back to tie it back? I think this was the right choice. It works for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of other examples. You're a big Lord of the Rings guy. Throughout the Hobbit trilogy and the original trilogy, were there musical cues or themes that stayed the exact same?
Absolutely. Similarly with Star Wars, throughout the course of...
Star Wars, I think, is the best example of where that John Williams theme is essentially used...
in everything that they do.
I think pretty much everything.
And it's remixed and you get different variations of it and whatnot, but it always it makes you feel like you're in that universe, right? And one of the things you and I touched on last week was that really over the last several months, is that HBO has the opportunity to capitalize on Westeros, Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire in a very Marvel or Star Wars way, which ironically... Since the first episode, George R. R. Martin has come out and said straight up, that's what he's going for.
Right, okay.
He is trying to create an MCU-style world,
extended
universe, to where they can crank out shows and stories forever and ever. So now I'm imagining that even with the Jon Snow sequel to Game of Thrones, which will be the most sequel-esque thing we get, where it picks up right after Game of Thrones ended, that they're going to have this too, right? So it's just going to be...
highly likely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Now we can talk about your crab feeder.
No, we don't have to talk about crab feeder. He's one that I had. That's just one thing that probably because well, let me just tell you a story.
Tell me a story, Barrett.
I've got 2 dogs.
I do.
And they like these peanut butter dog treats. These I fill up a Kong or whatever with
Dogs
the peanut butter
fucking
and
love
yogurt.
peanut
and
butter.
they love peanut butter.
It's like catnip to the dogs.
Yeah, and so I just, I roll around with these Kongs, and that's why they call me the dog feeder.
Right.
Is because I just pace around the house with these Kongs, putting them in various locations and letting the dogs just go absolutely nuts on these poor Kongs.
Sure.
Right?
Sure,
And you really feel for the Kongs.
And then when your enemies come, you cover them in peanut butter and let your dogs eat them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Pretty
with
disturbing
that.
visual, Barrett.
Yeah. So, but no, we can jump into the beginning of this episode, since we don't really get the crab feeder until the very last frames.
No. We get the crab feeder straight up at the very beginning. You may have forgotten overnight.
I may have. Yeah. You're right.
Opening scene of the whole episode is the crab feeder doing his work.
Okay.
We're a half of a year, by the way. This is very important context.
That's right.
Half a year past the Queen's death. Something to keep in mind as we watch this entire episode, all right? Half a year has passed. First question for you.
Yeah.
Did the time jump throw you at all?
So my quick answer is yes. Here's why. Because this speaks to something broader that this season is doing that I don't really think is. I'm not saying this is good or bad yet. There's a shitload of ground to cover time-wise.
Yeah.
And that is very obvious to me through 2 episodes.
Right.
Because we are really just like biting off huge chunks of plot in like 10, 15 minute,
increments,
right? And so for everybody through all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones that would complain about basically episodes 2 through 7, where they were like, they're just setting up the chessboard, it's too slow, like that one was kind of boring, like it just didn't have enough for them. I don't think this season is going to do that. I realize that we're only 2 episodes in, and who's to say? Maybe there will be a throat clearing or a minute to breathe and set up the chessboard a little bit more. But through 2, we are hurtling towards something, and it feels like a place where they kind of want to get to before maybe pulling off the gas a little bit.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
The pacing on this show is certainly different than it was in Game of Thrones season 1, right? There's a very clear objective here. And I don't know which objective it is. That's one of the beautiful things here is that I'm not exactly sure where they're going to try to end season 1. Are they going to bite off the whole of Fire and Blood?
No,
I don't think so, dude.
No.
Season 2 has already been renewed after the success and the numbers that came from episode 1. Obviously, if you weren't aware of this, it's time to celebrate because House of the Dragon has been renewed for season 2. So I've already started to kind of suss out how much of this are we going to take on this season?
Right.
And while I'm with you, there's a little bit of concern around like, wow, man, we've really covered a lot of ground through 2 episodes. I feel like the chessboard, the setting up of the chessboard, it's just done with different pacing for this particular series. Yeah. And I'm not too worried about it because they had to look, we know there's some kind of time jump, right?
Yes,
like a significant one, significant one, where we look at a completely different Rhaenyra and Alicent Hightower.
Yes,
I mean these actresses are going to be replaced by older actresses. We know that is coming. It's not something that's hidden from us. And certainly, I expected some amount of time to have passed between 1 and 2. I did not see 6 months coming, but I thought it was handled perfectly so far. It's clearly something we are going to continue to do as the story progresses. And I think in the case of Fire and Blood, it's exactly because of what you just said. There is so much for them to cover to get, that they really had to pick and choose their moments. And they kind of talk about that in the behind the episode thing that airs after the actual episode itself. Just kind of giving you a reason, like, look, we made these decisions very intentionally.
Yep.
We had very specific things we wanted to get in front of you as quickly as possible to set up this story. And if last week, episode 1 really felt like a setup episode, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, the pilot usually does. So did episode 2. This was more of like, oh shit, here's everything going terribly wrong. Like you can feel the momentum building towards the chaos.
Yeah, we're clicking up the roller coaster. We're clicking up the uphill very quickly here.
And then we're going down.
By the way, you mentioned the time jump. It's going to be very bittersweet because I just want to give shouts again to Millie Alcock, who's playing young Rhaenyra.
I know, dude.
And Julie Carey, who's playing young Alicent, because really standout performances from those two along the way here. I thought, let me make sure I'm getting her name correct. Emily Carey is playing young Alicent. Thought she really stood out this episode. This was kind of, she had a lot to do and a lot to carry here, especially as like, that's one of these stories that like, in kind of in old Game of Thrones, we probably building on that for several episodes. And here we are, we're halfway through, we're 1.5 in, and boom, Viserys is already announcing his engagement to her.
Ta-da!
Right?
Didn't take very long.
It did not take long.
Look, we knew, obviously, based on Otto Hightower's decision to send his daughter to the King's Chambers in the premiere,
that it was
going to go poorly.
Likely, yeah.
That something bad was going to happen in this regard.
Yeah.
Certainly, it would have been difficult for us to see how quickly that did happen. So, the episode opens with the crab feeder feeding people to crabs, which is apparently what he does, Barrett. I don't know if you've noticed, but they seem to have aptly named him the crab feeder.
Okay, so let me give you my first take on crab feeder, and then we'll touch on him again at the end here.
Yes.
Isn't this kind of a... did you feel like the crabs were like a little bit anticlimactic?
In what way?
Like, okay, so episode 1, you've got Lord Corlys, and he's like, apparently they call him the crab feeder based on how he likes to punish his enemies.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh, yeah.
Sounds tight.
He's going to be like jamming crabs in their butts or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't know. And then what he's doing is like letting crabs slowly like bite you.
He's basically like, look, I got hella crabs over here on this beach. What we're going to do is fuck up our enemies and then just like, so that they can't really move, and then we'll throw them on the beach and let the crabs eat them slowly. Like, it's real weird. But then he's also nailing other people to posts and shit.
Well, because otherwise you would just be able to get up and move because crabs aren't very fast.
Right.
You know what I
So
mean?
he's got to make it so you can't move first, then he feeds you to his boys. But how he decided on crabs, how any of that came to be...
It was just like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure you die of like drowning, thirst, starvation, heat stroke, like all of these other, you know...
Before the crabs would finish you off.
Before the crabs, like, even
I
like
think that's the point.
Get to a bone.
No, but they're like, it's the slow torture of it.
Okay.
The point being, this is clearly a sick man.
Yeah.
Whatever the crab feeder is, we don't really know. Something horrible's happened to his face. There's some crazy shit going on there. I don't know if it's just the helm or if it's his fucking face that's got some deformity.
You remember like what's the villain's name in Snatch? It's not like why do I want to say Blockhead? He's like the old villainous mobster in Snatch. Anyways,
I feel like that's half the cast of Snatch.
That's true. Anyway, remember when like everybody's scared of him because he'll feed you to the pigs?
Bricktop. I got your back, bro.
Thank you.
So does Google.
I was close with Blockhead.
Bricktop. Yeah, he feeds everybody to the pigs.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's way scarier.
So you're not scared of the crabs?
I'm just that was my initial reaction is like these
fucking crabs?
There's like a million scarier animals in the ocean.
So if you're in the writer's room, you're like, can we make him the snake feeder? Or the spider feeder?
Spider feeder.
I think this is the only thing that visually, I mean, look, I'm with you. I feel you. It's kind of humorous when they're zooming out on this guy who's just like working somebody with his hammer, torturing them, and there's like hundreds of crabs waiting around on the ground like, oh, we're about to get fed. Yeah.
Okay, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and finish this take.
Do it.
Even though we don't actually see the man's face until the end. We see the crabs, we see what he's doing. Then at the end, we get the visual of this guy. First, but before I concern troll too hard, I'm into it. It's cool. It's scary. This dude is demonic as fuck. And,
different kind of villain than we've had in
very,
Thrones.
Crazy looking. But it has to be said, this man looks like a villain from Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's fair. He's got a little bit of that I've been underwater with Strap Bill thing going.
Yes, he does.
A little bit.
So I just that's what it reminded me of.
Some barnacles on him.
So I had to put it out here. We don't actually know if that is like some sort of helm he's wearing, or if that is like
his face.
I spent too much time underwater, and the barnacles they attached to my face,
and I swelled up a little. I can't really tell. Yeah, I can't really tell what's going on there. But it looks. My read is he's got a gnarly mask, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then we'll obviously talk about him at the end of the episode again as he comes back up. But Lord Corlys, played by Steve Toussaint,
yes,
is freaking out because he's like, "Hey, yo, I told you about this last week. We got this triarchy situation, the Free Cities uprising, and now my ships and my men are getting dragged into this. Like one of the ships that he just took was my banner flying on it.
Yeah.
And I want somebody to do something about the crab feeder and we find out it's the Stepstones. That's the area that the crab feeder has commandeered, if you will, if you want to go Jack Sparrow with it.
He's getting in these shipping lanes, Ross.
Can't have that,
You
Barrett.
can't have that. You
Gonna
can't
cripple the
you
realm.
can't have him in the shipping lanes. He's gonna beggar the ports.
And it sounds like that's mainly, keeps throwing that at us. Gonna beggar the ports. Do you understand how the ports will be beggared, man? And Varys is like, I don't know. It sounds Viserys, excuse me. He's like, yeah, I don't know. Sounds like you're doing us a favor, taking out the pirates.
Yeah.
That's what he says last week, right? So at this point, Corlys is trying to escalate this up the emergency complaint ladder or whatever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't particularly go well at first. I guess everybody's just kind of like, whatever, man. I don't see why we should deal with this
What's
right
happening
now.
with the Triarchy and the Crab Feeder, they're over in the free cities, right? So that's what we remember as like Essos and Bravos, right?
Pentos, I think.
Pentos, all those free cities that are like...
They don't fall under the crown.
They don't fall under the crown. They are not part of the Seven Kingdoms. And I always think that I always enjoy when we tie them in because it's really the only like other kind of location / country / realm
that we deal with.
We even deal with. Everything else is pretty within these Westerosi Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
So getting acknowledgement that there is like this other thing that is kind of nearby, but like
less under control,
is not part of our thing, is always kind of interesting. But yeah, so that they are. Where was I going? Where was I going with that?
Let me just say when this was brought up,
like, plot wise, that they're doing something over there, and Westeros does not want to engage in like all out war with them because it's not something that they've ever done before, and it's not a precedent that they want to like put out there. Basically,
two things they don't want, Barrett: ports being beggared.
No.
Or all-out war.
Right.
Got to avoid both those things,
We'd
right?
like to avoid both of those things.
As Viserys says, it's his duty as king to avoid war until it is unavoidable.
Yeah.
Which is, you can see the frustration. I'll just say this. When we watch Game of Thrones, when you got Robert Baratheon, when you're introduced to the king stuff, when you're looking at Joffrey, nobody talks back. Nobody talks back to the king. If you show the king attitude, you are endangering yourself. Lord Corlys seems to have absolutely no problem back-talking, standing up and talking down at the king. A lot of disrespect being thrown around. And the more we've watched this show so far, you can see what Damon was referring to last week. The king is surrounded by users and sneak thieves, and all these dudes are playing. It's just like with Thrones, right? Everybody's playing their own game. Everybody's trying to spin their own wheels and get things going in their own direction, even if they're presenting as, we're just trying to help you. We're just trying to help you make the right decisions, Viserys. It's not that at all. Really, there's some ulterior motive always for these fuckers.
And as we watch in all of these types of shows, but especially in Game of Thrones, right? And we talk about previous kings and who was good and who was bad and who was cruel and who was mad. Wow, that really just rhymed amazing. On accident. That was amazing. Nice. Clip it.
Please
kid,
clap.
Clip it.
Please clap.
But like Viserys, like Damon said, falls on the weaker side. Like, is he respected? Yes, but he has none of the fear element.
Right.
Not even like a little bit.
He doesn't seem to have that dog in him, like
he doesn't have that
the way
dog in
Damon
him.
does, right?
The way that Damon does,
but I can't get a feel yet.
And there's also moments. No like, you think back to somebody like Jon Snow, who was talked about as so perfect for the throne because he was able to command real respect, but also did not have to be a fear monger. He did not have to impose himself or use fear tactics like that.
Right.
Viserys is kind of caught in this middle ground where he's like kind of a doormat a little bit.
So far, yeah.
But not really believable as like a scary guy.
He's not somebody that would intimidate you.
He's not very
He's a little soft,
He's
right?
a little soft.
He strikes you as a nice guy. He's not the dude who's going to rip out your throat and put it on a spike. I mean, you can't even really take him all that seriously when he says things like, "What would you have me do? Put his head on a spike?" And you're just like, "Yeah, we all know you're not going to do that, dog."
Right. Yeah.
So but there are moments with King Viserys so far, and we'll get to some of them later in the episode, where I see him. It's not as if he's just listening to anything anybody says.
Right.
He's aware on some level that there's a lot of conspiring going on, and he's trying to navigate that, and it seems too much by himself.
That's a good point to make. He is a little soft, but as Princess Rhaenys says, he's not an idiot.
Not a dumbass.
This is a smart guy too.
Yeah.
So he does see some of what's going on.
I mean, he's not Robert Baratheon. He's not a straight meathead, right? He's got some action going on in his brain. But he's also not Robert Baratheon in the way that Robert Baratheon was terrifying. Smash your head in with a hammer and eat and drink way more than you.
Yeah.
And had a hell of a gut. This dude's just pretty much a nice guy, right?
Yeah.
Patty Considine, excuse me. Caddy Ponsadine,
Cattywampus.
is crushing it through 2 episodes, I would add. I'm still impressed with the casting, and we can get to that later. But anyway, so to kind of close out our beginning here, we find out the king's own brother, Daemon, who we met last week, who was banished. Well, in the 6 months that have passed, he didn't go where he was supposed to. He's not hanging out with his wife and wherever the king sent him. He actually seized Dragonstone and has been squatting there for half of a year. So
Yeah.
there's that. The Hand of the King, by the way, and Otto Hightower, this just keeps getting... the Hand of the King, Otto Hightower, and Lord Corlys really, really, really don't like each other. Those are like our 2 main rivals on the small council so far. You know how sometimes you can just tell, like, and these 2 guys are completely at odds.
Right.
They're both doing their own strategy, and in this first opening scene of the episode, I mean, that tension between those 2 characters at the council just continues to be built. They're on totally separate pages. They're both trying to get totally separate things to happen, and not even just with the marriage stuff, with every different angle of the show so far. So, Rhaenyra, after remember, she's her father's cupbearer at these council meetings. She suggests, very much out of turn, that, hey, we've got dragon riders. First mention of dragon riders, I believe. Why wouldn't we just send us? She's obviously one of them. Now, I don't know how many dragon riders they have.
To go take down Seaface, Crabfeeder.
Right. Well, yeah, to deal with, I think...
This is in response to Triarchy. To the Free Cities.
Right. So she says, why wouldn't we just send dragon riders to deal with this?
Yeah.
We could take care of it really quick. And her dad's like, that's cute. Get the hell out of here. Go pick yourself a member of the Kingsguard, right?
Yeah.
Very clearly does not want this little girl's advice, even though he's already named her the heir. Yes, an important distinction made by Barrett there. Her response was in regard to the situation with the crab feeder. Was not about Daemon, which she ends up flying over to deal with, right? So, yeah. Anyway, the point being, they need a new member of the Kingsguard because apparently the old Lord Commander of the Kingsguard died. He was sick for a while. So now the new Lord Commander is Rhaenyra's bodyguard homeboy, who we met last week, obviously.
Yes.
And they need to replace the dead guy, though, because you got to have 7. I don't know why I figured there were more than 7, but apparently you get 7 Kingsguard, right? And as Viserys says, this guy's going to be protecting you too. Why don't you go make yourself a pick? And Otto Hightower, this guy seems to be pulling a lot of strings in the wrong direction for the king, right? Like bringing out all these bunk-ass candidates who have no battle experience.
But nobody has battle experience.
That's true, because there hasn't been war.
Yeah,
right?
I finally got a chance to rewatch episode 1 with the subtitles on, and
man, you miss a lot without them.
You do.
Again, 2 watches for me. That's the way it goes.
And one of the things that I had missed is the whole thing that again, to mention Princess Rhaenys, that's what she's telling Corlys as they're watching. Like, and everything goes haywire. She's like, these guys are, they're full of something and full of seed, is what she says. But they're green. They don't know any battle. They're just got all this pent up aggression. They've been trained for their entire lives to do this shit, but they've
never gotten to do it.
But they've never gotten to do it. So they come to these tourneys and they are just like jacked up
and beating the hell out of each other
to the tits, and and beating the hell out of each other. It's amazing that like it didn't go poorly sooner. I'm pretty sure is what she says.
Right.
So anyways, that's who you have here presenting themselves as potential Kingsguard is the same knuckleheads who were murdering each other out on the play field.
Right.
Last week.
Right. So you've got
6 months ago.
Sir Desmond, who the height of his career so far is that he brought a would-be poacher to justice, which like I'm pretty sure I've done that at some point. Like that's not that big of a deal. Then you got Ryman Mallister, who won some tourney that Rhaenyra is completely unimpressed by. And then there's our boy, Sir Criston Cole, who, look, you spotted this last week. He was pretty clearly a standout guy.
Yep.
He was going to be something moving forward. He's both hot and experienced in combat. So, and in the Stormlands, Barrett, he was in the Stormlands. He fought for a year as a foot soldier against the Dornish incursions.
And the Dornish incursions.
Yeah, and then he was knighted.
Very famous incursions.
Very famous incursions. He was knighted by Sir Aerion Dondarrion.
Dondarrion.
The name Dondarrion mentioned for the first time here.
I actually think we heard Dondarrion
last week
during the whole tournament thing.
I think you're correct.
All of that The whole tournament, even watching it again with subtitles, is pretty confusing on what exactly the hell is happening.
There's so much, yeah.
With all the dudes, yeah. So we don't have to belabor
Why they
it, but
they're suddenly just killing each other in a big group on the tourney field, and you're just like, what the hell?
They're talking about Kristen Cole and the Cole house or whatever, but then like all of a sudden the Baratheon guy is the one putting his joust up, his lance up for
getting himself
for the queen that never was.
A favor.
And so it was all like a little bit. There's just a lot of information flying at you and a lot of faces. But yeah, this guy has got those Dornish good looks, and he was knighted by Dondarrion, who we can assume is Beric's great something or other.
Which is cool.
Very cool.
I like the ties.
Yep.
Now, Rhaenyra is obviously upset that none of these dudes have combat experience. By the way, they really focused on her little step stool. She needs a step stool to even be able to see over the balcony and pick her next member of the Kingsguard, right? This is one of the only parts of the episode where they remind you very clearly this is a small child. This is a little girl. She's 16, 17 years old, man. She's not some fully grown, tall woman who demands and commands respect with her physique.
We get an age in this.
What is it?
15.
15 years old. Yep. There you go. So, little kid, man. She's not some 40-year-old queen who stands up there like, I will pick my part. She needs a step stool still. Yep. So she's upset that none of these dudes have combat experience. She seems to be on a level somewhat suspicious of Otto Hightower. Like, these are the guys you rolled out to protect my dad, to eventually protect me. Bunch of losers with no experience. And then Hottie over here, who's my obvious pick. So she's straight up. She says, these are tourney knights. My father should be guarded by a man who has known real combat. And she like looks at them and is like, right? Anybody want to deny that to my face? Nobody does. And she ends up picking her boy, Sir Kristen Cole, our newest member of the Kingsguard.
Hell yeah.
He's got some sick armor later in the episode as a result. After that, Rhaenyra and the king end up dining together. And this is the beginning of a story arc in this episode where they are, clearly there's been a huge divide. For 6 months since the queen passed, they have been unable to reconnect as a result of the complicated nature of their relationship now, where she is the heir, he is the king. She's supposed to be learning from him. He also doesn't want to give her too much power and respect up front. She needs to kind of earn it. And they have this meal together where not much progress is made up front at first.
Yep.
Right? They're still pretty much unable to communicate with each other about what it is they've gone through. This shared trauma of losing Rhaenyra's mother and the king's wife in the first episode, like we saw. And in the way that she was lost, obviously. And there's a little tension there, right? There's a little confusion still. I mean, if they haven't discussed it, then Rhaenyra's probably like, and somebody remind me why my mom is dead right now? Oh, it's because the king actively chose for her to die in the name of getting an heir, right? So there's some level of confusion and anger there between the two for sure. But in their first little dinner here, King Viserys pretty unwilling to open up emotionally and really mend the gap. It happens later in the episode.
Yeah, and I think Rhaenyra also wants to kind of rehash what happened at the small council, and like Viserys basically just puts the total kibosh on it, says...
Puts his foot down, yeah.
Don't even think about it. You're young. You'll learn.
You'll learn.
But that's the end of the conversation. And
you'll learn to keep your mouth shut is the implication.
Yeah. You'll right. Essentially,
you'll learn when to speak.
You still don't have a place to speak or add input. You are still young and learning. Therefore, we don't want it. Basically.
It reminds me of in The Godfather 1 when the Don is meeting with the drug dealer dude, and Sonny speaks up, and he's like, shut the fuck up. And he's like, I spoil my children, as you can see. They speak when they should listen. And then after the meeting ends, the Godfather is like, don't ever tell anyone outside the family what you're thinking again. And it's sort of one of those moments where he's like, look, you're not ready. You're not ready. You think you're hard and that you know what you're doing. You don't. And you need to shut up until you do. So it doesn't go super well at first, but I had a question here in regard to this meeting and sort of just the king, Viserys, and his daughter, Rhaenyra's relationship altogether so far. What do you make of, obviously, the cupbearer thing is supposed to be so she can pick up on how the realm works, right?
Yep.
But do you think it's going as it should? Like, it feels weird. Look, Arya, for example, was once the cupbearer. She was like supposed to be a peasant girl who was the cupbearer for Lannister.
Yeah, for
Tywin Lannister.
For Tywin Lannister.
And when you put this up against that, it's kind of weird. It's like, oh shit, this seems like a very respected role. The king's daughter, the heir to the throne.
Well, I would say that I think that Arya does pick up some stuff by being the cupbearer.
She definitely does.
You know, they do allow her to do that. But if I remember correctly, Tywin like gives her that role because she's kind of puckish and like she does something where he's like, "You can be the cupbearer."
He's kind of like, "I like you, kid."
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
You got some swag to you.
So I think that the cupbearer, it's basically like being the intern for the small council.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it probably is a good place to hear things and learn how people talk and what the arguments are about and how the dialogue goes and how to rule and you know, organize.
And how to deal with the politics.
And deal with the politics and delegate and do all this type of stuff. Now, you know, so I'm with all that. You just have to, they got to get on the same page about what she's allowed to offer or what she's not allowed to offer.
And when.
And when.
Yeah, for sure. Also, the king has a finger that is rotting off now, which is, it's not great. The maesters are letting maggots eat the rot off the king's busted finger. What the hell is this? Last week we see the cut. We deal with him, the cut on his back, the sore on his back, whatever. He cuts his finger on the throne. Now he's got a finger that's rotting off. Did they forget that you shouldn't use swords that have been used to cut down men with grayscale before they melted those down and stuck them on the throne? Like, what the hell?
They did not. This
thing wasn't
really
sanitized.
Slacking on the sanitization. Yes.
Because now disease is spreading.
Disease is spreading.
Look, man, first time I sit down and get a sore off a chair, that chair is gone. I'm not just going to keep trying and, like, now my finger's rotting
off.
Or,
like, you know, you'd think that they would come up with some type of, like, you know, throne cloak.
A cushion, maybe?
I'm just throwing an idea out
Something
there.
that protects your back
you, like,
and
shroud
butt.
yourself in when you're going to be sitting on said throne.
Big comfy throne cloak.
Yeah, to avoid these types of cuts and nicks and disgusting sores and scabs.
Yeah, because he's having to do an episode of like that Joe Rogan show back in the day where they made you do scary shit. What was that called? Oh man, why can neither of us remember Rogan's original?
Why do I want to say Freak Fest?
It was Fear Factor.
Fear Factor.
You were FF. You were close. Freak Fest sounds tight though. That was a pornography you watched.
Joe
last
Rogan
night.
was also the host of Freak Fest, I believe. Yeah.
But yeah, he has to stick his hand in these maggots, and you're just like, well, there's one of our unsettling moments for the episode.
Yeah, but I don't totally know what is going on there yet. It seems like it is the throne. He is cutting himself on the throne.
And it is causing issues.
And it is causing issues.
Like further issues
but
beyond
it seems
the cut.
like, but I guess the question is, if just any old person was cutting themselves up on their throne, would they be having the same reaction?
Or is this Viserys specific?
Viserys specific, yeah.
It seems to be specific to him.
It does. Yeah.
And that there's some kind of issue, right? And this is all very ominous. Very ominous foreshadowing surrounding the king, and like things aren't going great, you know what I'm saying? And on top of that, he's got to deal with these health issues now. So, yeah, I mean, like we said last week, there is a void coming. At some point, we are going to... Yeah. He feels like our Ned Stark of the season,
he does.
right?
He really does.
Where you're like, he's a nice guy. He's trying his best. Look at his morals. Oh, he's gone. So just prepare yourselves. I don't know how long Viserys is for this world, especially if he's going to lose a digit every week.
Ned Stark, famously played by Ned Bean.
Exactly. Famed actor Ned Bean from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. From the original. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra's bestie, Alicent Hightower, is in the king's chambers, still comforting him on and off, seemingly playing. It seems like she's on both sides of the fence. You can't get a feel for Alicent's loyalty. Is she Rhaenyra's best friend? Is she actually just trying to get closer to the throne at her father's behest?
Yep. Also difficult to tell. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Is she loyal or is she full of shit?
Well, and does she want to be comforting the king? Does she want this position of power?
Or is she forced into it?
Or is she forced into it? Because when Otto, says to her at some point before he goes off to Dragonstone, he's like, "Will you see the king again tonight?" And she says, her response is like this very kind of timid, "If you wish," as
she seems very under his control,
as if she's only doing it because her father is asking her to. But then in the conversations with the king, it's harder to get that read because
they seem to have a connection.
Because they do seem to have a connection, and she seems to, if not flat out enjoy being there, at least not like be recoiling from it. She's not a shut-in, she's not a mute.
No, she seems to be enjoying herself. They have a real bond. I think she enjoys hanging out with Viserys for all the reasons we just covered. He's a nice guy. He's our Ned Stark, played by Bean. And, I mean, yeah, if you're picking between hanging out with your dad, who's a really creepy, conniving psycho, clearly Otto is not not the best dad, or this really nice guy who's literally in charge of the realm and can keep you safe from your dad, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting angle to keep an eye on moving forward. Otto is installing his daughter as a means to an end for himself. I don't know that she's going to stick with that shit once she's on in the seat of power, you know?
Yeah. Now, I mean, question being, right, like what would Otto, what could he achieve further? Like
What does he stand to gain?
Yeah, as we already know, he's a second son. He's not going to inherit the land or the property of the Hightowers, right?
Right.
Or the titles of Lord of Hightower or whatever. But he is hand of the king. You know, he's the right hand of the king. Now he's got his daughter in there, so he will potentially be the father of the future heir.
Right.
And I think that's really that's what these people care almost the most about, right? Is strengthening their own line.
Yes.
So by having the heir, he will be propped up as well.
His daughter being queen, I mean, I don't know that in and of itself directly promotes him in any way because he's already hand of the king.
Yeah.
But certainly if his daughter has a son with the king, all of a sudden his bloodline is the heir to the throne.
The heir to the throne, yeah. Yeah, but I like what you're just painting this picture that I think is probably important about Otto, because in episode 1, I think we're a little bit on Otto's side, I would say, in some of the scenes.
Certainly not all the way off his side yet.
Damon picks his son at the tourney, and we feel a little bit nervous about that. We don't necessarily want anything bad to happen to this guy's kid, right?
Right.
And as we go further, I think that we are painting this picture of Otto being kind of this gray area schemer, not really good or bad either. And I think that is going to, in turn, influence our future feelings about Damon himself, who we already know is likely to operate in that gray.
Right.
Right? Like, I think the positioning Otto as not that great of a guy will help us look at Damon as kind of a more Robin Hood-esque, this dude's kind of bad, but, I think we kind of like him.
For sure.
Type thing. Which we get a little bit more of in this episode as well.
Today's episode is brought to you by Felix Gray Glasses, the best blue light glasses in the game for watching House of the Dragon in comfort and style. 5 years ago, Felix Gray set out to create eyewear that would improve daily screen time, and since then, they've been on a mission to create a better relationship with technology. Felix Gray lenses filter 15 times more blue light that can make screen time tough on eyes and disruptive to sleep. Been working on the internet for a long time, my whole career. Over a decade, I spend like 10 hours a day staring at screens, and when I'm done with work, my eyes are worn out. But I like to watch movies, TV shows, play video games, all of which involve screens to wind down. So a few years ago when I was introduced to Felix Gray, everything changed. These glasses are the quality of designer frames. It's not some cheap blue light coating painted over them that's going to chip off. That never happens. No chipping, no cheapness. Incredible quality designer frames that are stylish and functional as they protect your eyes from all the blue light that the screens we rely upon emit. Hard to cut back on screen time. Really difficult. I wouldn't even recommend it at this point. There's too many good things to watch on screens, Barrett. Just get yourself some Felix Grays instead. I've got a few favorite pairs. I'm wearing the West frames on my face today, but also the Faraday and the Nash. Use our URL, felixgrayglasses.com/OCC, to support the show, and you will get free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges, non-prescription and prescription available. Check them out today, felixgrayglasses.com/OCC. That's FELIXGRAY, glasses.com/OCC for free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges. Okay, so the king ends up meeting privately with Lord Corlys and the queen who never was.
Yes.
His wife, Rhaenys, as it were. And they tell the king, listen, man, we want to combine our houses. We want to get these ancient and powerful and pure bloodlines working together. We want you to marry our 12-year-old. And the king, he seems like up front, pretty weirded out by her age, by the suggestion even on the whole, and he's kind of trying to feel out other people for what they might think about a child-bred situation.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting thing about Fire and Blood as a whole, is it does seem to want to tackle some of these things that are like very clearly weird about the times.
Right. And about monarchies historically.
In a more head-on way.
Yeah.
Right?
A little more on the nose, for sure.
Yeah, because this scene that you get with King Viserys and Lady Lena,
who's not a lady, she's a small girl,
walking, through the courtyard,
It was hilarious.
Like that is they are very clearly showing you something there, right?
These two people aren't supposed to be together.
And this is something that happened.
Yes.
Right? Like this 30-year-old men would take 12-year-old wives.
Right. 40
and it's
45-year-old even.
Yeah.
Who knows how old this dude
is? And that shit's weird.
No, it's not. It's not. It doesn't make much sense because, you see, Barrett, a 12-year-old doesn't have the life experience to make decisions about things like bedding or childbirth or, any fucking thing at all. When I was 12, I had the capacity to decide when I was going to pee and poo. That's pretty much it. Obviously, this conversation is pretty awkward. I mean, the king, he seems weirded out by our age, but then later in the episode, he's picking Alicent, who is only 15 or 16, as his child bride.
Yeah, so again, to go back to what the show is trying to do, there was a little bit of dissonance there for me as well, trying to show the how weird it would be to take the 12-year-old. Now, we don't actually have an age for Alicent yet. I think she's supposed to be
with Rhaenyra around there.
But I think she's a few years older. I think she's supposed to be older than Rhaenyra.
Okay.
So I think she's probably pitched more like 18 at the very
youngest
of age.
So that the king in this decision feels like he's making a just choice,
yes.
right?
And I think that what they've tried to do is show that, like we said, that there is a real bond between the two, that they are at least at a point where they can converse about real things,
real life,
and life and history and all that type of
She's
stuff.
She's not just parroting things her parents have told her to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So there is a contrast there, but yes, of course, it is still it doesn't totally hit, and I think it's still supposed to be a little bit weird, as we can see it written all over Princess Rhaenyra's face. That okay, well, good job by you spurning the 12-year-old bride, but now you're picking my best friend who's 6 years older. Still a little.
Could have given me a heads up there, Pops.
Couldn't give me a heads up, and now you're pissing a bunch of people off.
Now everybody's angry.
At least the 12-year-old was going to be good for the realm, good match, solve most of your political problems.
Internationally, things would be smoothed over, but instead now you've gone and mucked it all up, Father. You've gone and mucked it up. But yeah, the sexual standards in Westeros are weird, and that's not the least bit shocking.
But King Viserys kind of in a tough position, in between a rock and a hard place, you might say here, with all of the choices that he's got to make.
And I wouldn't even argue that King Viserys has done anything wrong yet. Have we seen them have sex? Have we seen him in any way sexually advance onto Alicent? Perhaps this is just his bestie, and he wants a companion. Seriously, though, everyone on the show understands the stakes, and that the king does need to create more heirs. He does need to strengthen his bloodline. They are in a weakened position, where, as he repeatedly states to Rhaenyra, "You're my only heir." This shit is we got one fell swoop, and we are screwed. So you riding off the Dragonstone is not cool, is inexcusable. So even Rhaenyra says, I get it. It's your job, and your duty is to the realm before it is to me or our family, right? It's to the realm. But, he could have picked literally anybody else, and I think she would have been happier. Yeah. So, anyway.
The thought we got a mention of Reavers from the Iron Islands in this
episode. Islands are mentioned, yes.
But also I was going to say that the Valerians, Lord Corlys and his wife Rhaenys, and their bloodline, who some say actually predate the Targaryens.
Some say.
With some texts.
Some texts
say that.
Hashtag some texts.
With their Valyrian blood. They're the two most powerful old Valyrian houses, all of that. They are the house. This guy, Lord Corlys, his nickname is the Sea Snake.
Yeah.
He's got all the fleets. He's got the ships. Obviously, we know that the ports not being beggared and the shipping channels being open are the two most important things in this man's life.
Cannot have those ports be beggared.
And so they kind of reminded me almost of the Greyjoys a little bit in that way, with their fleets and their water and control of the seas and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they're the Navy, baby, like Rihanna.
Yeah, that's right. They've got the Rihanna Navy. This would have been a powerful combination. Putting these two houses together, strengthening the bloodline, making a real true, old blood, whatever, combining it all.
A powerful move that he says no to because it's a child.
Grabbing that navy.
Yeah. Solidifying their relationship forever is the way it's pitched, which is hilarious to me because as I'm watching, I'm like, that's not a real thing. you people aren't capable of solidifying any kind of relationship forever.
That's true.
Certainly not based off marriage. Things can go awry. Who the fuck knows? It'll probably make it worse, frankly.
Yeah.
But that's always the pitch, right?
Yeah.
This will bring you the strength. Everybody will respect you again. They'll all look at you and say, my God, he did it. But when he goes and meets with her, which is funny, he considers their proposal to the point that he goes on this walk with the 12-year-old. But 30 seconds in, he's just like, I can't fucking do this. You're I
mean,
idiot.
he does have but then he's got that conversation, right, with the other guy on the small council who I don't even think we have a name for yet.
We do. We'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Give me 1 second, and then we'll go to that, okay?
Please.
So Corlys and Rhaenys pitch the king on everybody saying the crown is weak and susceptible right now, that he needs to show the realm strength through a marriage that brings another powerful and permanent alliance to the Red Keep, right? That makes all of this just more structurally sound. So their pitch is obviously, you should marry our daughter, Lady Laena, who's 12. And Lord Corlys's fleet of ships, as the king says, is one of the most valuable assets in the realm. So it's nothing to shake your dick at, what he's working with over there. Now, it's also mentioned that the, quote, wounds made by the Great Council are still... this is brought up by the Grand Maester. He's like, listen, my lord, one of the other reasons you should maybe do this... The Great Council, which is what we open this whole series watching, where Rhaenys is passed over for Viserys, that obviously created a rift between these old Valyrian families and King Viserys sitting on the throne and his family.
Yeah, another thing that probably everybody caught except for me, and only really picked it up on my second watch through of the first episode that just bears mentioning here again. They call all the lords to Harrenhal. They put up these two people. Jaehaerys does not make this decision. King Jaehaerys does not make. They vote.
Yeah.
So the lords of the realm,
a bunch of them,
vote on whether it should be Rhaenys, who has the more obvious claim, or Viserys,
or a dude
who's the man
with a cock.
Yes.
And as Rhaenys says in this episode, they had their chance. They will never. Basically, what she says is, look, it was obvious. I was the one. If they had any intention of ever having a female queen, it was going to be me, and they didn't pick me, and it's never going to happen, and it's not going to happen for you, and you need to keep your eyes peeled, basically, right?
Yeah.
So,
I believe she was the eldest. She was the oldest child of Jaehaerys' eldest son.
Right.
So she was the oldest grandchild, basically.
Which, again, is a difference between this and the books that has repeatedly been called out by book readers. In the books, it is Rhaenys' son who is put up against Viserys. So on the show, they've taken it a step further into the battle of the sexes, men versus women, sexism, women being held down, all that. And I like it. I think it adds to the story even more, especially because Rhaenys is a super interesting character to me that I do not know what to expect.
Yep.
And Damon does seem to be right. One of my notes here through the second episode is like, yeah, this guy's surrounded by sycophants and users and plotters and abusers, and it's not good. And I mean, I guess the point is that anyone in power, you're always surrounded. Everybody's trying to get a piece of that ass, Barrett.
Always, yes.
You know what I mean? So they say, wed our daughter Laena, unite the two great surviving Valyrian houses. That's Corlys's words. He says, you can show the realm that the crown's strongest days are ahead, not behind, which I got to say, hell of a sales pitch. Yeah. I mean, that got me fired up. I'm like, all right, maybe he should marry this 12-year-old. But when the king goes walking with Lady Laena, they obviously, first of all, aside from being shown, he's not really cool with this 12-year-old situation, we also get cool info about some dragons. They use the opportunity to kind of drop in like that Viserys was the last one to ride Balerion the Dread.
Yep.
That there's some badass dragon called Vagar who still lives. He's out there. He's nested somewhere. Nobody knows where. I bet your sweet ass that's coming into play.
I think it's a she.
He, she, whatever. Vagar.
Too big for the dragon pits, I believe.
Too big for the dragon pits, Barrett. Just a bit too big. But yeah, pretty obvious from the get-go, just in this Lady Laena thing, that she's been told everything to say. That all the lines she's regurgitating. So she says something super obvious, and the king's like, Dad told you to say that? And she's like, yep. He's like, what'd your mom tell you to say? And she says, that I wouldn't have to bed you until I turned 14. And it's just like, oh my God, what are we doing here? So let's jump to what ends up being one of the coolest and most important scenes in the episode, where Rhaenys and Rhaenyra are watching this unfold. King walking around with a 12-year-old. They're both like, Jesus, fuck. It's Rhaenys' daughter, by the way. And, but even she's still like, doesn't this disgust you? Doesn't this make you feel icky about your role in this world, and it puts Rhaenys very quickly into that gray area we are discussing, where you can't really tell if she means all bad or any good or any mix of the in-between.
Yeah.
But she does deliver the line that we get in the trailer, which is obviously the setup for this entire show. Men would rather put the realm to the torch, would sooner burn this all down than allow a woman to sit on the Iron Throne, to ascend to the Iron Throne.
The Iron Throne. Yep.
And it's a very important conversation for Rhaenyra because, as Rhaenys says, nobody else is going to be honest with you about this, but I'm going to. You're not getting that seat. You're not going to get up there. It's not going to happen. And you need to be watching your back to make sure that you can survive this, basically, is her message. And yeah, it just gives us a little more depth to the queen that never was as well, right? A little better feel for where she's at. She didn't have to say any of this. She didn't have to give Rhaenyra any advice. She didn't have to be kind at all. But she was.
Is she kind? Did you read this as kind?
I read it as an attempt for one woman to level with a soon-to-be other woman about their situation in the world and how she needs to be made aware that the plotting and the scheming has only just begun. Remember, we're 6 months out, so it's basically, I took it as a warning almost, and I don't think you deliver a warning to somebody unless you're trying to help them in some form. She seems conflicted about something, and I'm not sure how to read it yet. We're not supposed to be able to.
And I think what you're, I think that's accurate, and I think what we're probably feeling there is that technically, at the moment, they are adversaries in a way.
Yes.
But yet, they are both women, and that is what they are like. That's essentially what they're able to share and kind of be on the same team about.
Absolutely. So, to jump to our next big event, Daemon, it turns out, has stolen a dragon egg. And, okay, so it wasn't him, right? Did you take it as, I took it as Daemon himself flew his ass down here, snuck past 50 guards. Apparently there's 50 guards guarding the dragons. He went in himself. Because it makes sense because he's able to go in with the dragons. They're not going to roast him.
Yeah,
he's Daemon Targaryen.
Correct.
It's not that he could just send some emissary down here to do this for him and go into the dragon pit, right?
No, he definitely came down and got
firsthand.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I thought. And people are like, no, he probably sent one of his boys. I'm like, no. One of his boys would have been roasted alive in the dragon pit. It had to have been him doing it himself.
I think that's correct.
And it kind of gives this question to how much power he does or doesn't have. 50 guys is a lot of guards. He got through all of them? That's a lot of guards. Did they respect him? Did they see him? Is he super ninja-like in his ability to get in and out of places? What's the deal here, Barrett? We don't know yet. But it was Dreamfire's egg that he stole, which ends up being important because it was a pretty direct insult still about the heir for a day who passed away. The king's Prince Balon, by the way, was his name. Baelon. Prince Balon. This was his egg that they were going to put in his bed with his little crib with him or whatever. So when the king hears that, he freaks the fuck out. He's like, son of a bitch, I'll go out there myself. I'm going to beat his ass. And Otto's like, that's a terrible idea. I'll go, though. And also, they mentioned Daemon is going to take a second wife. It's the prostitute spy he rode off with in episode 1.
Second wife, as is Valyrian tradition.
As is Valyrian tradition.
I believe is mentioned. There's a loophole in the texts that says, if you go...
Everybody gets 2.
You get 2. If you conquer one place, if you have got one home like the Vale, you get 1 there. And then let's say you go take over another place like your ancestral home, Dragonstone, you get to have another one there.
Anywhere you can conquer, you can add a wife.
I believe
is the rule.
That's what it says, yeah.
Yeah, also he has all of the gold cloaks out there, which is kind of funny. Like he was like, all right, I've got the city locked, like it was very important to him. Let's clean out all the rapers and the murderers. Let's chop off heads and balls. And then the second his brother was like, yeah, you're out. He took all of the city police with him? Like the city's just unpoliced?
I got the same question. Like, okay, what? So he just took the entire city watch over to Dragonstone?
Yes.
Like there's just no... There's none of them?
No gold cloaks left in the fucking city. None of them. In the Red Keep, none of them.
So everybody's just raping and murdering and stealing again, I guess.
God knows how it's going in Flea Bottom, dude.
Down there in Flea Bottom.
Crime is skyrocketing. The numbers are way up. They never should have defunded the police. Defunded the gold cloaks, rather.
I also just like, and this is kind of like an old complaint that we made a few times back in the original show. And I just don't think that we're ever going to get any real answers about it because it's too complicated and too hard to just like put into natural dialogue. But so he's got 2,000 men there, is what we're saying, right? But like, what about? Is that a lot? Is that a little?
How big are the armies?
What's the Targaryen army size? It doesn't seem
that's not a lot of context to the size of their forces yet. I will say,
which there never is because it's too complicated, and I get that.
Sure,
It's just one of those things where you're like, okay, so we took all the gold cloaks, but that still doesn't seem like enough to battle an entire Targaryen army.
And I don't think it is. I don't think he has any intention of doing that. I think he knows his brother would never go full all-out Targaryen on Targaryen war.
Yeah.
But obviously, look, this is all up against the backdrop of what is said to us before we even see the first opening sequence in episode 1, which is that the only thing that could stop the Targaryens is the Targaryens.
Yeah.
The only thing that could destroy their rule is them themselves. So obviously, when we get this, I mean, one of the coolest scenes of this entire situation, of this whole episode, is in Dragonstone.
Yeah, this is it's the best scene of this episode for sure.
Where we have the face-off between Daemon and Otto Hightower and the small little groups they've brought with them. Not too big, right? I mean, not a whole bunch of people rolling with Otto, but he's got his fresh Kingsguard guy right there, who I was pretty scared for him for a moment. I was like, oh, well, he only made it one episode, the hot Dornish dude. But, man, the tension that they were able to build on that bridge, the way these lines are delivered between Rhys Ifans, who, again, I apologize for mispronouncing your name for the last 20 years or so, calling you Riz, Rhys Ifans, and Matt Smith. I mean, just chef's kiss all over this thing, dude. It was so sick. It made me feel like I was right back in Game of Thrones, which is, you know, what we're always looking for in life, to get to feel like we're watching early days Game of Thrones. And this did it for me. I was so stoked on this scene. Your thoughts, Barrett?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really good. I thought it was well shot. I've heard some people complain about the visuals and the CGI through 2 episodes.
Really?
And I disagree. I think that it's been really...
You want to know one thing I've noticed?
Well done.
I think you need a pretty damn new TV these days. Because I think if your TV's 5, 6, 7 years old and they're rolling all these new cameras and all the new tech and all the OLED crap, they've got God knows how many Ks we're at, 16K or whatever now.
Yep.
Bro, it's not going to look good.
Well, and that's another actually interesting point because my second watch of that first episode that I mentioned with the subtitles was on my phone.
Wow.
Where it also looked really good. And that is something that we know about the younger generations and about the streamers is that they are making stuff. They are making sure that it looks good on phones, tablets, and smaller devices.
And laptops, yeah.
Because that's how younger people are watching this.
Yeah, that's how the Zoomers,
like,
that's how they consume their media.
So it's either, it needs to, you're probably right. I'm sure it probably looks great on like very new OLED top-line TVs. Probably looks great on mobile. Anything in between, it might be a little...
You're going to struggle.
You might see the seams a little bit more. But
no, and to your point, I watched it on one TV that's about a 50-incher, all right, that's newer. Looked great. Watching it on the big TV at Bolen Media headquarters out here in the living room for my rewatch, it looked kind of shitty. That TV's old. It's old. It's an older TV. It's not the newest technology. And it makes me look back to Season 8 of Thrones. That's the TV I was watching on when I was going, I can't see a goddamn thing in the Battle of Winterfell. So I do feel a little guilty, like maybe part of the responsibility there should be on us. Yeah. And just to throw it out, make sure your TV settings are correct.
I was about to say,
if you've got it on video game,
recalibrate those colors.
Dude,
yeah,
for sure. Go calibrated dark. Find the setting that works to where you can actually see what you're supposed to be able to see. If it looks like shit, it's probably your fault, is my point. I do not think HBO at $20 million episode, renewing after one episode, is throwing out a product that isn't going to look good on screens. That's probably on us. So just saying, complainers.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I loved where I was going with that is that I loved the look of this scene. The tension that you mentioned is great. The words exchanged between Otto and Daemon, and then obviously like, you know, when swords start to be drawn and like there's a little head nod and Caraxes starts like coming down the hill.
Oh man.
You were like, oh, that big red and black dragon also has like hazy clear eyes.
And it's going to murder all these people.
And it's going to murder everybody. But it's like extra devilish and demonic looking with those those eyes that
He's
are
got
not
some
like,
personality to him, the dragon. When Rhaenyra ends up flying up on Syrax, he's like almost a grin. He's like, hey, one of my buddies. That is neat. It's really, really fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, look, the thing to remember here is the second the dragon crawls up to the top of that, and Otto is like, what are you, fucking nuts? You're going to declare war on the king? You're not going to survive this. You're going to die here. And Daemon's like, yep, but so will you. This guy does not care at all. And when that dragon crawls up to the top of that thing, man, you're supposed to remember what you've seen these dragons do.
Oh,
they have
yeah.
killed people by the scores, thousands, hundreds, and we've watched it happen in Game of Thrones. We've seen what they're capable of, and they're waiting for the moment to show us in this season what they're capable of in this world, right? In the House of the Dragon world.
Yeah, and
with their saddles
and when
shit.
we get those kind of like you're like, oh, y'all have a nuke, and then like your nuke just shows up in the nick of time.
Yeah.
And they're just each standing in front, like with the
Cold War,
with the codes out, just kind of looking at each other. It also just gave me the sense of like, yeah, picking the Targaryens as the next show to dive deep on was smart. These dragons are sick. Once they figured it out, how to show them and how to manipulate them, and like showing people riding them, like, this is dope, man.
Dude,
like,
it's so cool.
The dragon versus dragon stuff is awesome. All of the talk that's been going on. Viserys saying like they're a power we never should have trifled with. The opening of the series where it says that the Targaryens, the only thing that could possibly take them down is themselves, essentially. The knowledge that we have already, like in our back pocket, about how they eventually had to chain all these dragons up. They all shrunk down. They disappeared, and it all went away.
And then
like,
Dany brought him back, right?
Yeah, like it's just all the mythology and just power behind these dragons is pretty awesome.
And it's being built up even more through this show, though. I mean, to your point, you made a really great comparison that I've seen a couple times between the dragons and nuclear weapons, right? It's almost an Oppenheimer type of situation, like, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, because once you've wielded the power of a dragon, you realize that this is not safe. This is not something that should exist, that could crumble everything. And as you said, man, we know something is coming that is going to get this family to say, we can't let these guys out anymore. We can't bring the dragons out anymore. It's not safe anymore.
Yeah.
And that eventually leads to no more dragons. That's a big ass thing to know in the back of your head, like, holy crap. So I think it makes you enjoy the dragon scenes even more, knowing that inevitably something bad is coming down the line. Rhaenyra does fly in here at Dragonstone and de-escalates the situation. She takes it from what was almost certainly going to be bloodshed to, there's this weird connection, man.
Yep.
Daemon and Rhaenyra have this thing. There's a mutual respect. They understand each other.
Yep.
Right? It's almost brother and sister-esque.
Yes.
Where it's like you don't like each other, but you love each other, and you get it. And when he turns and throws that dragon egg back over his shoulder all nonchalant, and she just catches it, bro, it's one of the best moments in the episode. Because it just gives... The man has a swagger to him that is like, it's Targaryen to its core.
Yep.
The way he walks, the way he talks, the facial expressions Matt Smith gives us. It makes you feel like he studied Viserys, Dany's brother. What was his name? Viserys?
Viserys, yeah.
The other Viserys, the shittiest one that we've met so far. Like, he studied that guy because he's got this vibe, right? This entitlement to him and everything that he does, but at the same time, a complicated nature. And it's just weird. He's just doing so well, man.
Yeah, him throwing the egg was great.
So, question for you. What did Daemon's whore think was happening? Because clearly he didn't fill her in on all the blanks. He didn't tell her she was pregnant. He didn't tell her they were getting married, right?
Right. Yeah, that is what I took away. That the whole thing, the whole like
ruse,
the information coming through the grapevine that he had married this woman and that she was already pregnant,
and he needed this dragon's egg for that reason.
Which is why he wanted the dragon's egg, is to put in his own heir's crib.
So that was all bullshit.
Was all bullshit.
Okay.
And she had not been clued in on any part of that bit of the ruse, because it seems he knew she wouldn't be down to be used like that.
Right, which we get into their relationship a little bit more, and the gist of it is this. She wants to be free from fear. She lived her whole life worrying about what man would do what to her, right? Now she has secured herself, attached herself to a dude that she believes can remove that, he could be so badass, basically, is the implication, that she would never have to fear another living soul. And she explains that to him, and he kind of like, we're still feeling them out, those two, because it's real. There's like a level of respect, but also you can't tell how much one is using the other yet.
Right, and the whole bit that he's trying to pull here essentially places her in a position of great danger because she's a huge pawn,
which is why she's upset.
Hey,
now the crown's gonna want to take me out. Why the hell would you tell him I was pregnant? This is all really bad for me.
Yeah,
I wanted the opposite of this.
Yeah. So I almost pulled from that like she doesn't actually want to be his wife. I think she'd prefer to be like his mistress / confidant /
lover, sure. Whatever they are now.
Yeah.
I don't think she's looking to take a step into the royalty and deal with all the bullshit and drama that these people are, right? And she's certainly seen enough of it already just being by his side. Going to be very interested to see how they further develop their relationship.
I did have a note here when she delivers her kind of big monologue about being liberated from fear. Is that kind of a new accent that we're hearing? I didn't pick up on as much whatever that was in the first episode.
I mean, I think she's supposed to be like a low-level street hooker. This dude has elevated through society, in a way.
She's a secret whisperer and a spy, and was kind of like seemed to be one of the head girls at the pleasure parlor,
right
down there on the Street of Silk.
I definitely couldn't place it. The accent,
but I'm just saying, like in that first episode, she, when she's all like, "You are Damon Targaryen."
Oh, you think she talks a little different?
I think the accent has changed.
I mean, it's
from pilot to episode 2. Yeah.
You and I just having covered The Sopranos episode by episode on Patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. One of the most interesting thing to me during every rewatch of The Sopranos that I've done, by the way, our podcast's on there, friendly to first timers and rewatchers, is that Tony's voice changes from episode 1 to episode 2, and certainly from season 1 to season 6, where he further develops it, hones it in a little more from the pilot to episode 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. By the end of season 2, you've got a solidified Tony Soprano voice.
But I am on accent watch
for her,
for Sonoya Mizuno.
Yeah. Who, by the way, waiting to see Otto with a hooker. Clearly a hooker guy. The only people who talk this much shit about hookers are people who are doing hookers. Just so you know.
Fair, very fair.
Today's episode is also brought to you by MyBookie. Imagine if you could bet on House of the Dragon. Well, with MyBookie, you can bet on entertainment. During Game of Thrones run, they had all kinds of crazy bets you could place for seasons 7 and 8, how the show would end, who would live and die. And if you think betting on sports is fun, wait till you place a bet on your favorite TV show. Just go to mybookie.ag, use code DRAGON, to unlock a deposit bonus when you sign up. Mybookie.ag to bet on all the entertainment, sports, and politics you can handle, baby. Just use code DRAGON when you sign up to unlock that first-time deposit bonus and enjoy the online casino. They've got live blackjack. They've got live roulette. Also, as far as sports go, all the live lines, prop bets, and futures you could possibly want that your heart could desire at mybookie.ag. Code DRAGON. Go check out all the different options they've got. Support the show when you make your first deposit by entering code DRAGON when you sign up, and you will get a deposit bonus, as it were. Barrett, I have a question for you.
Dragon. Yes.
Dragon. MyBookie.ag. Who the fuck is Lord Lionel? The dude that you brought up earlier that I was like, we'll talk about him later.
Yeah.
The king brings in another guy for advice. And at first you're like, I don't know. And you said he was unnamed. Well, the only reason I know he's named is because of the subtitles. They do not say his name, I don't think.
All we know is that he sits on the small council and has been at all the meetings with his little, sphere in the table.
Pretty uninvolved so far, though.
But don't totally know what his title is, like what he's the master of.
No clue. Just Lord Lionel to me.
And I don't know the name yet because I've not seen this episode with subtitles yet.
Now, he gives the king advice one-on-one, which again, I mean, it's like, look, there's not that many people who get one-on-one unfettered access to the Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. This is a very special moment for him.
Sure.
And he gives the king his unencumbered opinion on who he should marry, right? I'm pretty sure it's cumbered by somebody.
I don't know. It seemed like good advice. It seemed like good advice to me.
You thought it was sound strategically.
I thought it was sound strategically.
Not morally, strategically.
Yes. After he lays it all out, I'm like, yeah, I guess you should marry the 12-year-old.
No, okay. So here's my question, though.
There's a couple of moments where they do that.
Absolutely. But here's my question, then. It seems like the king knows. Like, he asked this guy for his advice. As you just said, perfect sales pitch.
Yeah.
Lays it
Yes.
out for him like a PowerPoint. Here's
Yes.
exactly why you should marry Lady Lena,
Yeah.
the 12-year-old little girl. And then he still doesn't do that. So what happened?
Yeah.
Does he suspect this man, Lord Lionel, of working for Corlys?
For Corlys? No. So maybe. That's a good point. I hadn't really considered that.
Tough to read, though.
That this guy might be, like having already made a, earmarked a deal with Lord Corlys. If this all goes through, if he's able to swing the king on it. But my opinion was, look, I think we take into account also Rhaenyra's her second conversation with her father, where they are able to make more of a connection and a bond and say some meaningful things to each other. And Rhaenyra does say that, like, yeah, I know you gotta remarry. I'm cool with it. Mom would have gotten it just like I get it, right? Like all these things. So like everybody is saying that the king can and should get remarried at this point. My takeaway was more that he has basically fallen in love with Alicent.
I'm with you. I think there's a real, like we said earlier, it's a connection. We don't know to what degree exactly yet, but certainly if he's given the ability to choose, he's going to pick the girl he actually enjoys spending time with. He actually shares conversations and feelings and thoughts with, not this 12-year-old moron who just wants to ask him where the dragons are.
Yeah. So I think that I don't know what it says about the king's decision making just yet, because I think it's fairly obvious that this was not a great one in the grand scheme of things. It felt very like passion driven and emotional.
Yeah.
And like this is what I want to do.
It did not feel like it was his responsibility to the realm over himself. It feels like he picked himself, right?
It feels like he picked himself. Yeah.
And I think that's supposed to be as far as we can go with it so far.
I would agree with that.
But it was just such an interesting scene during my rewatch, in particular, watching Lord Lionel like lay this out. And again, everybody watching being like, well, from a strategic standpoint, yep.
No,
and then him not picking it.
Yeah, you get the line from Lord Corlys early about like, show the realm that the best days
are ahead of us.
Are ahead of us. And then you get the Lord Lionel pitch, which buttons it up real cleanly. And then you get Rhaenyra giving her okay, basically.
Yep.
On marrying the 12-year-old.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, okay, so he's going to do
the 12-year-old.
Good, just sound strategery. He's going to,
wait till she's 14 to better, please.
He's going to dial it in with, he's going to make everything, he's going to smooth it all over with the Corlys and
everybody's going to see us as powerful and the crown will be
and nothing bad
fortified.
Will happen.
Yes. Yeah. And then he doesn't do that.
He does not do any of that.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, Corlys and Otto are the two guys that have everyone in their pocket. If you're looking at another character, whether it be Lord Lionel or one of the other members of the council or whoever, they're in one camp or the other, in my opinion. It's either Otto's or it's Corlys's.
Okay.
Everybody's been bought, everybody's paid for, but those seem like, through two episodes, are two main power players on the council that kind of have put everybody else in their place. I don't know that for sure. It's just my read so far.
Yeah, thinking about the sycophants on the small council and the fact that everybody is out for their own means, also, and then this decision to wed Alicent instead of Lena also makes me think back to the line in episode 1 where Daemon tells the king, like, where the king asks Daemon, "Who would you protect me from?" And Daemon says, "Yourself."
Yes.
And that's always for anybody, whether you have a company or a business or you are in politics or whatever. It's like, do you want people that you're not connected to through blood there, or is blood the smarter decision? Right? It can get really hairy either way you go. It's very tough decision to make.
Yeah, money and power screw things up for people.
And family can also be sycophants and users and abusers and all that as well. So
sometimes the worst possible version of that.
Exactly. So it doesn't really prevent that, but it's interesting to think back and just as we develop the Daemon character and his perspective on all of it and what his true intentions and feelings are, right? Like to think back to that and say, well, if Daemon was the hand here, would he be able to eliminate all of this, the Corlys and Otto machinations behind the scenes? Would he be able to steer the king away from this type of almost irrational or impulsive decision, right? I mean, yeah, that is the big question. Obviously, there is this divide. Does Viserys need to be protected from himself, is what I'm saying. Yes, and I think there's this obvious divide between Viserys and Daemon, and that of the many conflicts we deal with on this show so far, that one's
probably the most interesting to me between these two brothers. We don't have a ton of backstory for them in terms of their relationship together.
Sure. Yeah.
And Damon is likable through 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
He's as likable as Viserys is to me. I mean, he's not in some bad guy world where I'm like, nah, I can't jive with this dude. He's a child murderer or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any reason to dislike the guy so far. I can see some of the ways he's maybe been misconstrued, or maybe that he got outplayed strategically by the council, by people who aren't his brother. But I don't know that he didn't have best interests for his family or his brother or even the realm at heart yet. I don't really know. So the gray areas we are developing through 2 episodes have been extremely impressive. And that's what we kept hearing leading up to this. George R. R. Martin was ecstatic about how gray the characters were and how we would all have to wrestle with their morality or lack thereof. And just to take it back to The Sopranos, that's one of the things that makes that show so great, right? And it's what makes great stories, is you having to sit there and suss out what is it that's driving this person? What is it that they're thinking and feeling? What's important to them? And man, it's been tough through 2 with this show so far. Just to cover some bases quickly as we close out here. King Viserys finds out Rhaenyra went to Dragonstone. He's pissed. As we talked about earlier, he lays out why he's pissed. She can't do that. And that's what leads them into their more meaningful conversation about the loss of his wife, her mother, securing the realm and their lineage and all of that, blah, blah, blah. Corlys gets very, very pissed off after the king announces that he will actually be marrying Alicent Hightower, not Lady Lena. Storms out of the room. Again, didn't think you were allowed to just do this. Didn't think, but to Damon's point, King soft. Yeah. King needs to have some heads rolling. You can't just be storming out of meetings, man. We're sitting here having a meeting. You can't just storm out of the meeting. It's my meeting. But he does, and he goes and meets with Daemon Targaryen in private. So now we have a little side alliance here.
Side alliance, yeah.
Between Corlys and Daemon. It's a very troubling alliance for the king, obviously, that he is completely unaware of so far to our knowledge. But in terms of what may be one of the most complicated and important relationships moving forward, Barrett, between Rhaenyra and Alicent.
Yes.
What is your read on this relationship?
Well, you got to think it's going to fracture it a little bit.
I think it's a little fucked up now, yeah.
You mentioned Corlys storming out of the room. Rhaenyra does as well.
Yes, she does. She's very upset that her father failed to inform her. By the way, I've chosen your bestie to marry instead of the 12-year-old.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Failed to mention that.
But I certainly think that will be one of the more interesting relationships to watch as we go forward. And yeah, I mean, there's just that's kind of a big.
What's happening?
Not necessarily a cliffhanger for the next episode, but certainly something that we're teed up for and ready to kind of see some fallout from.
Absolutely.
And then, man, the Corlys Daemon thing, not predictable, but not surprising, I would say.
I love his little pitch to him too, like, we're the same kind of dude. We're both self-made. And I'm like, no, he's not. His last name is literally Targaryen, brother. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But sure.
And man, I think that we are watching those two have the conversation, and basically, what is Corlys's pitch, right? Like, if you come clean up the stepstones, that could really show your worth
and bring you back into the fold.
Bring you back into the
fold. You'll be back
somehow.
At court, respected amongst the council.
Maybe
it's not a strong pitch from Corlys.
Yeah,
and Daemon isn't buying it all the way either.
It doesn't seem like he's buying it all the way. He even drops the line in there about how, like, I'll talk any way I want to about my brother. You will
fucking not.
Yeah, you will not.
Which is very much a thing, right? You could say whatever about your family.
Yep.
I can't. That's not my space. Right. Same, vice versa, right?
But it's certainly it's dialed up for you as like, oh shit, the king's in trouble with this side alliance, which immediately has me thinking there's going to be more to this, and I'm sure some twisties and some turnies along the way with this little side alliance.
Absolutely. This is one of the places we are very, very queued up for that, for some twists and turns. Yeah. We don't know what's happening or what's going to happen.
But yeah, cool speech from Corlys. So
love that, dude. Again, Steve Toussaint, Matt Smith here in the same room, playing off each other is amazing. And the questions I have, and I'll just lay them out. We don't have answers for these, but in regard to Rhaenyra and Alicent Hightower's relationship, all right? Princess Rhaenyra and the soon-to-be queen, apparently, Alicent Hightower. Who loves who? Who loves who? Is this a friendship? Is there a sexual energy to it? Is it sexual in some way? Is it that Rhaenyra loves Alicent and that love isn't reciprocated, or is it the reversal of that? We don't know. We've gotten really complicated moments and looks and even touchy-feely moments where it's like, what is this?
Yes.
And that's exactly where we're supposed to be, right? Why is Alicent chewing off her fingernails like she's me? That it's not a good thing. She's not okay with what's happening. She is being controlled by Otto Hightower. She's not getting to make her own choices, and there's some deeply unsettling shit happening with her sitting there biting her fingernails off.
That's a great point.
I don't know how far that's going to go, but it's, I mean, pretty spot on, dead obvious that she's troubled, that she is not okay internally. Is Alicent intentionally betraying her best friend? Were they ever even actually best friends, or was it always Alicent playing the game at her father Otto's behest? We don't have the answer to these questions, and it's one of the things that's going to make Rhaenyra and Alicent's relationship moving forward one of the best parts of this show, because we strictly do not know. What we were presented with in episode 1 has been completely shredded in terms of their friendship and their relationship, with Viserys' choice to marry Alicent, and I don't think Rhaenyra is going to be super stoked on her being queen. I don't think it's going to go over well.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you feel about Daemon after 2 episodes? I told you how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, as far as a character, I think he is so far the very clear, just like MVP of the show.
I love the guy. He's fucking awesome to watch.
Extremely charismatic and a lot of fun to watch. Swagger around,
dominates every scene he's in.
Dominates every scene. So yeah, I'm big on Daemon right now.
Then let's take it to the crab feeder. What's with this dude's face? Do you have anything else? Because look, obvious question here moving forward: will Daemon beat the crab feeder? Right, as it's suggested by Corlys. Hey, you should go take care of this crab feeder guy to make you a hero. Everybody will think you're tight again.
Yeah.
Or is he going to join him?
Okay.
Join with the crab feeder. It's crossed my mind, obviously.
Sure.
Do I think he's just going to go do exactly what Corlys said? Absolutely not. So what other options does that leave? Well, maybe he sees the crab feeder as a tight dude he could use in his crew to go take over whatever he needs to take over, right?
I mean, who else did we watch start forming an army over across the Narrow Sea to eventually come storm Westeros?
Dany.
There is another Targaryen that's done something similar.
Similar hair.
So if that's a great observation. Very possible that's one of the twists we could take here, is that Daemon tries to
recruit the crab feeder.
Recruit the crab feeder.
I mean, because it's a little obvious if next episode it's like Daemon versus the crab feeder in one-on-one combat. Like everybody can see that coming, right? But if they wanted to continue to kind of get weirder and weirder with it, there are some other options.
Well, and to that same point, right? Like you mentioned this earlier, we haven't actually seen the dragons get to do work yet.
Throw down.
We know that they can. We know that they can just burn from the sky hundreds, if not thousands, of people at a time and just end things.
It's the nuke.
So, right, like the stepstones, the crab feeder, all of this people could easily be taken care of with one of the dragons. It's basically what Rhaenyra says.
It's basically the implication that it is implied not only verbally but visually through the next episode that's what's going to happen.
But to focus both the very beginning and the end of the second episode and do all the long lingers on crab feeder's
almost
face,
like a True Detective villain,
and helm or mask or whatever that thing is.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like he's just going to be wiped out easily next episode. Right?
It'd be really weird if it was just, and now Daemon flies over on a dragon, and look, the crab feeder and all of his people are gone. No, that would be really, really lame.
Yeah, they built up this whole crabs eating bones off of people that are still sort of alive.
Crab people.
Walk like crab,
talk like people. All right, the crab stuff's getting funnier and funnier as we discuss it for sure.
So I think that crab feeder will be around for at least
a couple more weeks.
A couple more weeks, it seems like. But yes, still very piratey. There's even lots of mentions of pirates over there.
Yarr.
This guy is a pirate's villain for sure, and he's out there just nailing people to wood to driftwood,
and then feeding them to the crabs,
letting the crabs go absolutely nuts.
That's why they call him the crab feeder.
Yeah,
because he'll feed your ass to the crabs. You see, yeah.
What do the crabs say in Finding Nemo? They just click. It's the birds that say mine, right?
Mine. Yeah, don't know what the crabs say. Hope we find out next week, though. Barrett and I will obviously be doing an entire other episode discussing Season 1, Episode 2 of House of the Dragon on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles a little bit later in the week. We're up to around 1,000 people on the Patreon now. Really awesome to see those numbers climb. We hope you all thoroughly enjoyed last week's hotline call-driven episode to further discuss, analyze, and digest the season and series premiere of House of the Dragon. Going to be taking even more hotline calls from the Mollusk Militia this week. If you want to be able to call into the hotline, you must join the Mollusk Militia tier on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. Everybody can listen to the episodes if you're on Patreon. You can only call in if you're in the Mollusk Militia. Those people have earned that right with a minimum pledge of $10 monthly to our show to support Oysters, Clams, and Cockles and what we have going here at Bolen Media. We appreciate each and every one of you who joins patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. I promise you, it is worth it. We have a blast on these hotlines. First of all, the calls are great, and you're getting to hear members of the Clam Fam, the Mollusk Militia, the Crustacean Nation, our listenership, give thoughts, angles, and takes that you didn't necessarily get from Barrett and I, and then we get to break those down and discuss them as it were. So we appreciate you for listening, period, but appreciate you so much more if you'll go above and beyond, support our show, pledge a minimum of $5 monthly on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles to get even more Barrett, even more me, even more of the Clam Fam, and your thoughts and takes through those hotline call episodes that we do, in addition to our obvious regularly scheduled programming where we recap and react to the episodes. Please go to patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles today and support Barrett and I in our dream to assemble our own army of crabs. We want to build a crab army. Follow us on social media. We're on TikTok at Oysters, Clams, and Cockles, on Instagram at Oysters, Clams, Cockles, on Twitter at Clams and Cockles. Follow Barrett at Barrett Dudley on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me at WR Bolen, as I mentioned last week and will mention every week. Full video of these episodes on YouTube all season long. Just search Oysters, Clams, and Cockles on YouTube, and we are right there for you to watch if you don't just want to listen. Barrett, wave at the good people on the YouTube.
Hello.
Throw up the west side one time, if you will. Bolenmedia.com/shop for OCC merch. Barrett and I will be back later this week on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles for further discussion and analysis of what this episode was titled, The Rogue Prince. And then again, we will be back next week for discussion of episode 3. Cannot wait. Having a blast so far. 2 down. 2 good ones, Barrett.
Yeah.
We're really doing it, folks. We're back. Rate and review the show. Help us climb the charts even further. Again, thank you for your patience this week. We will be back to recording right after the episode airs, starting with episode 3. Until next time, bye-bye.